Hey guys, we're back with yet another keyboard review, and today we will be taking a look at the Leopold FC980C mechanical keyboard. Let us find out what Leopold has to offer, especially when this keyboard is officially priced at 1,299 ringgit Malaysia. I know right now you have a lot of questions inside your mind. I mean, why is this keyboard cost over 1,000 ringgit? What is so special about this FC980? What is Leopold thinking? Now, easily we have to say that the FC980, Leopold actually made two different variants for this keyboard. Number one is the FC980M, which is using the standard Cherry MX key switches, while the C variant we have here is using Topre electrostatic capacitive switch. Now, I know that might sound very high-tech and sophisticated to you, but in fact it is not. It is just as simple as closing a circuit. But instead of the standard Cherry MX switch, which they have two different metal contacts inside the switch housing, so whenever you press down a key switch, the two metal contact touches each another just to close the circuit, and then the keyboard sends a signal to a PC to register the key press. Meanwhile, for Leopold, they uses the Topre switch. So it uses a capacitive sensor to detect the key press. So how it actually works is that on the PCB itself, there is a capacitive sensor. So on top of it is a conical coil and as well as a rubber dome on top of it. I mean, just the rubber dome is to provide the tactile bump. So it depends on the spring's resistance. So the capacitive sensor will detect the metal conical spring. So halfway through it will register. So it actually actuates halfway through and it registers the key through the sensor on the capacitive. So that's why they call it capacitive sensor, to detect the motion. So there's no metal contact happens to closing the circuit. Now, enough explaining what is the difference. If you are interested to learn more about the Topre switch, you can search on YouTube or Destority. I think there's plenty of information available on the internet out there. So without further ado, let us just dive straight into review of this keyboard and see what they offer inside the box. Okay, first of all, of course you do get these paperwork. I'm not sure why they provide two different copies of user manual over here, but the bigger document they do have is warranty information, while the smaller booklet what we have here is same. They have a Korean and English language of the user manual. So leave that aside, and this is the FC980C. And of course, it comes with the transparent plastic keyboard cover, which is quite useful to prevent dust from settling on your keyboard when you're not using it. The last thing we have inside the box is the detachable USB cable. This is a USB Type A to USB mini USB. So I do hope that the Leopold can eventually move on to USB Type C, because that is the new standard. And by the way, you also get this Velcro cable tie. So neat. So first look at this keyboard, it reminds me of those 90s and 80s keyboard. Of course, this color scheme is extremely popular with keyboard enthusiasts. And another thing you probably already noticed is that the layout is very different from what you used to see on a full-size or 10 kilos keyboard. To me, this is more like a Cherry G80-1800 series keyboard, with the little exception at the top right corner over here. The G80-1800 series has 8 keys on this cluster instead of just 4. So what they have done here is to remove the center arrow cluster, I mean including the print screen, scroll lock, pause break, insert, delete, whatever stuff, so that they move the numpad closer to the typing zone, but they still retains the arrow cluster over here. But of course, some sacrifice has to be made. For example, the number pad over here, the 0 has to be shortened to one size key, and meanwhile on the typing zone, the modifiers such as the shift, the control have to switch out a little bit. For example, the switch is now half of the length, of its original length. So these are the sacrifices they have to make so that they can accommodate the arrow cluster over here. And by the way, the arrow cluster is slightly like shifted downwards towards here, so of course the lower bezel here is slightly thicker than your standard keyboards. Other than that, this is a pretty standard layout. As for some of you eagle eye users, you might notice that they are actually using non-standard bottom row, but this is a rather standard design for the keyboards that uses Topre key switches. So I don't think it will be a problem if you want to look for custom keycaps for the Topre switch. Now the keyboard chassis is not something really special, but one thing in particular is you might notice there is a formula over here. I mean, this is actually a capacitance formula. I mean, just to showcase that they are using electrostatic capacitive switches. Now moving on to the bottom of the keyboard chassis, we can see there are 4 rubber feet on it. It provides a very good stability when you're typing on the surface, whether if you're on a hard surface or on this kind of mouse mat surface. So even the keyboard razor feet has a rubber feet to it. So depends on your personal preference. If you like to use your keyboard flat or slightly raised up, at least your keyboard still stay in place. At the top part of the bottom chassis is the cable routing for your removable cable. Just now we have seen, so that depending on your desk setup, so you can route your cables either straight up or going to the left or right. Now the keycaps on the FC980C is made out of PBT plastic. Yes, we know that PBT plastic has been really common nowadays, especially on cheap China keyboards. They also come with double shot PBT keycaps. So what makes this special is that it is actually using dye sublimation for its legend printing. So we know that double shot is how they form the plastic in a way that they form the legends first and then they fill out another layer of plastic on top of it as the top cover layer, so that there are 2 different colors of plastic on it. So that's why they call it double shot, and that means that the legends is impossible to be sand off or wear off over the time, because that is just the nature of how the keycap is being constructed. On the other hand, the other way of doing the same thing is that by using dye sublimation, which in this case is used on this keyboard and of course Topre's keyboard as well. What they do is very simple. It's just they form the keycap first with the PBT material, and then they dye it, and the ink seeps, sublimates into the keycaps, which means, let's say if you cut open this keycap, you will see that the ink actually goes deeper into the plastic. So why do they opt for the more expensive dye sublimation instead of double shot PBTs? Especially when I just mentioned that China has found ways to make cheaper double shot PBTs, right? Well, for some users, they actually claim that single shot PBT with dye sublimation feels better to type on compared to double shot instead, because double shot is actually 2 layers of plastic that was formed 2 different times. So, well, at the end of the day, it's still the user preference, and this kind of minuscule difference has a big cost to it. Now, looking at the bottom of the keycap over here, obviously it is not compatible with Cherry MX stems. If you're looking for replacement keycaps for your Topre switch keyboards, I mean, you have to specifically look for those keycaps, and they are not cheap. And the thickness is quite reasonable as well. As opposed to the Topre's own real force keyboards, Leopold actually provides you with the actual PBT spacebar, so you won't get shiny spacebar like the Topre real force 87U or 104U. Yeah. So now we have gone through the construction of the keyboard as well as the keycaps. Now what does it actually feels like when you type on the FC980C? It sounds pretty awesome, right? And if you're coming from Cherry MX switches and you have never touched any Topre key switches before, the closest thing I can explain to you is that you imagine it as a Cherry MX Brown or Cherry MX Clear, because when you press the key, there's a tactile bump to it because of how the rubber dome is formed when you press it and then bouncing back upwards. So that is probably the closest thing I can explain. And then if you are used to Topre key switches, for example a Happy Hacking keyboard or the Topre Real Force keyboards, I would describe the Leopold being a little bit different compared to the Real Force. Especially the Real Force rubber domes feels a lot more softer than the Leopold ones. This one, although I kind of like how it feels like, the rubber domes have a more stiffer kind of profile to it. It is very difficult to explain this way, but if you're used to the Real Force keyboards, I think you can understand what I mean. And when you compare it with the Happy Hacking keyboard, because Happy Hacking keyboard is using a plastic bottom plate and this one is using metal bottom plate, obviously the typing sound and the feeling is two different leagues. The FC980C, because of the metal plate and the stabilizers are so well mounted, each keystroke, every time you bottom it up, it will produce a satisfying the torque sound, THOCC. Yeah, whatever it is called. And that is the character that makes Topre switch so special, and it is why I love typing on this keyboard. Of course, some of you guys might be looking for gaming keyboards with RGB and whatsoever. No, this is not for your gaming whatever stuff. There's no RGB puke happening on this ever. Nope, not gonna happen. So to conclude, at the price of 1,299 ringgit, this is definitely not your everyday keyboard. First of all, if you are here trying to find out if the Leopold FC980C is it suitable for your gaming needs, I would definitely say that you have better choices out there, especially if you want just to use it for gaming. This one, there's no macro, there's no RGB puke feature and whatsoever, and definitely it is not something that your Silent Race or Speed Silver can offer. But again, this is a very specific keyboard to meet a certain group of users. First of all, you have to be a typist to be able to appreciate this kind of keyboard. So at 1,299 ringgit, one may say that this is probably they jack up the price or because of the low demand, low supply kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it really depends on your personal requirements. Sometimes you may ask, why do I need a Ferrari when Perodua, my V can also bring me from A to B? Again, it depends on your personal preference, and especially for us typists, we type a lot of reviews and articles. We definitely need a keyboard that can actually give us the satisfaction of typing instead of just typing on the standard $20 keyboard from your bookstore. So, what do you guys think of the Leopold FC980C? If you guys have any comments, do let us know. Like this video if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!